In my early career in the Air Force, I worked for a man who explained to me that the who, what, when, how are the easiest questions to answer. That's just analysis. The hardest question to answer is why. Why did something happen? I was always consumed by the why. I always wanted to know why things happened.
He was truly, he had this really high bar for himself and for other folks, and that's where he lived.
And so I remember making a mental note, get to know him, keep him close, because he's going to keep us safe and keep our patients safe.
He really does see the perspective that you're coming from. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's agreeing with it, but he's open to other perspectives. He's the quiet thinker.
I decided to join the Air Force in 1967, and by pure happenstance, I wound up in the very first biomedical equipment technician training class at Sheppard Air Force Base in Texas. When I was in the Air Force, the head of the biomedical equipment technician program for the Air Force was a Colonel Bert Dodson. He recruited me to come to work for a newly formed organization called CHESS.
I was working at Wake Medical Center, and Glenn had left the Air Force, and he was working as a kind of a consultant for 2 days a week.
And it turns out that one of my accounts that I had to visit every month was Wake Medical Center, where I met the in-service education instructor, Alice Young.
He came by, and we chatted for a while, and he asked me out.
I was your typical confirmed bachelor who was never going to get married and never settle down. And yet within months, I knew that I had met the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. And we have now been married 38 years. And it literally has changed my life.
I always feel like he wants the best for me, he wants the best for the kids, and he wants the best for himself.
Love working with him. Went to his Christmas parties. I mean, you just learn that he's completely upstanding. He's always prepared, always on time for meetings. It's just amazing.
So he was never a single-faceted person saying, here's what I'm going to do for me. He really towed the line for a lot of folks that he believed in.
I think because he's a good listener and a good teacher, and as a result is a learner himself.
I left CHESS and became an employee of the Wake County Hospital System. They put me in place with the intention that I would be there for 6 months, establish the department, and hand it over to one of their employees that they would hire. Rather than handing it over, I left the employment of CHESS and became a hospital employee and managed that department for the next 6 years. I left Wake Medical Center in 1980, and a friend of mine and I established a company, and we specialized in renting high-tech medical equipment to medical institutions, and Duke was one of our very first customers. The company thrived for 17 years, and everything was wonderful until our owner died. And again, by pure happenstance, a friend of mine that I knew through my board membership with the North Carolina Biomedical Association called me and asked, was I aware of anybody that might be interested in a management position at Duke? They had a vacancy. And it was kind of like, do I know somebody that I do?
And again, everything he does with the mindset that he's trying to advance and promote healthcare technology management and its role.
Glenn always had something, a cheerful greeting. He was always welcoming. If you had a concern that was a professional concern, then he was there to listen to you, and he was there to share with you and work with you to resolve.
Came on board here at Duke to take on a task that no one had ever done before, and that was taking on Y2K.
The Y2K compliance officer role changed my outlook forever and changed my focus from more technology management to safety management.
And he went through every device in the entire hospital, about 17,000 at the time.
We actually have more equipment than that. That was just the amount of equipment that required some kind of remediation.
And what he did was he came in and he created a spreadsheet and he began to meet people. And he worked through hospital administration when necessary to get people to understand the criticality of it.
My focus wasn't so much on how getting the technology fixed, because I knew that Ray and his team would handle that. My focus was more on helping other departments understand their business practices and processes. People had to understand how their businesses were organized, what their business practices were, and have alternate strategies already developed and tested in advance of Y2K. In many regards, those 18 months changed my outlook on healthcare forever. How does healthcare get delivered? How do we as a department, clinical engineering, allow the practice of medicine to continue safely and help support all the other team members?
Made us safer. It was one of those things when I first met Glenn, he felt distant, a great resource that we hadn't capitalized on. So when we started evaluating more products and started evaluating our practice when we broke things, and I know it's hard to believe nurses break things, but we do, we started engaging Glenn.
One time, one of the clinics brought in some kind of, I don't know if it was a cautery, but it was a wand that shot out a flame. Then Glenn found the exact way that this little fire thing could be off and on at the same time. I mean, I'm sure it was a legal device, but Glenn found the exact way that it was off and on at the same time. He just can find the thing, figure out how it works, figure out how it could be unsafe, figure out how to break it. And it was amazing, and it was invaluable. So nonetheless, that item was not approved.
In that 18 months, my role had been filled by Brian Poplin. He became my boss and the director of clinical engineering, and I became his assistant director.
We started working together. It was just a tremendous experience. Glenn's an individual who has an amount of knowledge about the clinical engineering field that is only exceeded by his passion that he shares for that field. You know, Glenn's a person that once you meet him the first time, you know that he's somebody that you're going to have a strong bond with probably for the rest of your life.
Brian had a number of managers and mid-level managers and supervisors in the clinical engineering department that he felt needed leadership development. And he felt that the opportunities afforded by Toastmasters International was one of the tools that he wanted to make available.
Well, and there are two sides of Glenn. The side that is the relentless pursuer of excellence. And then there's the fun side. In Toastmasters, you have these short speeches.
Most of these speeches are 5 to 7 minutes.
He can prepare one on the way.
Which for many people are 5 to 7 minutes of pure unmitigated torture.
He gets to talk about woodworking. He gets to talk about the things that his Mancoon cats that he would like to try putting them in a bear suit.
Each speech fulfills an objective.
He can create a speech fully developed, beginning, middle, end, with great, powerful introduction and a bam conclusion, and it just knock your socks off. But he does it on the way to work.
And so at one point, he stopped working at Duke because we didn't renew a contract. And I mean, we were just bereft.
So I left as the assistant department head as an employee of Aramark. 6 months later, I came back as a Duke employee. When I first came to work at Duke, I recognized that we were having technology issues not so much of technology failure, but of people's failure to use technology appropriately.
I don't know if I would have felt as comfortable if Glenn wasn't here. He had to have been here for me to feel comfortable in the direction that we went and where we are today.
Just to watch him think was amazing because he's like a savant. I mean, this guy can find the problem in everything.
He's done so much inside and outside, and he's helped so many people to understand that our focus doesn't need to be at this desk. We have the ability to do this in North Carolina through the NCBA, nationally through the AMI.
You know, he's been a person that is always looking out to try and help others grow and to help others gain that knowledge that makes them more successful.
He could take a problem and put it into words that nurses understood.
But Glenn has an ability to make the right decisions and to look straight down to where things need to be done and how they need to be done.
If you really want to learn something, he will take you along and for a really fun ride. And he is now, I think, carved out a piece of safety that can't ever go away now.
Now, it really all comes back to trying to answer the why question. And ultimately, the reason that we want to know why is so that we can change practices, change behaviors, educate people to stop those kinds of issues in their tracks. And so often, the worst failures that we experience in healthcare are brought about by people not having the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, are we doing that right? But I think that that's part of the culture that we brought to Duke, the changes that we as a group made to the culture. It changed forever the way people think about safety, and I think it has had a fundamental impact on the lives of patients that come to this institution.